Hey everyone, welcome in. It's Nico. I have a question for you. What makes a good roguelike? That's a question I asked myself when playing Balatro the other day, simply because it's a really good roguelike. I love roguelikes and play a lot of them, but they aren't all good in the same way. Games like Dead Cells to Skull the Hero Slayer make sense as comparisons, but Dead Cells to Risk of Rain gets a little harder. Risk of Rain to Slay the Spire to Hades, Hades to Balatro, all roguelikes, all good, but all different. That's the idea that started this video, but I very quickly remembered a lot goes into video games, and roguelikes are no exception, so this is going to be split up into a couple different videos, and fair warning, a lot of it is going to be from my perspective and my opinion. I'm going to try to talk to some different people to get their perspective on things, but a lot of it is going to be coming from me. This is going to be more analytical than my usual style so that I can get a better answer than me just yapping into my microphone aimlessly for 5 minutes. This first part is going to be simple. What are roguelikes and roguelites, with a T versus a K? What are the defining factors, and what are the different gameplay styles of rogue we are going to look at? Because this genre is so vast, we're going to use a couple different examples for games in order to understand it more in depth. Certain games will be talked about more than others, but it's not because it's a better example, but simply because I am better at it and therefore more confident to talk about it. I have a couple hundred hours in Dead Cells, even done some pretty fast speedruns if I say so myself, but I only have a handful of days invested in Skull. I'm around 2/3 of the way through the difficulty levels in Peglin, and only about 2 levels into the Ascensions in Slay the Spire. The main games I'll be using as examples are Dead Cells, Hades, Risk of Rain, Peglin, Slay the Spire, and Balatro. There will also be some guest appearances from Astral Ascent, BlazBlue Entropy Effect, Skull the Hero Slayer, Have a Nice Death, Wizard of Legend, One Step from Eden, Inscription, Islanders, Luck Be a Landlord, and Undermine. Now that we know what we are using as our examples, let's start with our first question. What is a roguelike? According to everyone's most reliable source of information, Wikipedia, a roguelike is, quote, a style of RPG characterized by a dungeon crawl through procedurally generated levels, turn-based gameplay, grid-based movement, and permanent deaths of the player character, unquote. This is mostly based off the game Rogue, which is what the genre is named after, kinda like Metroidvanias, a genre of games similar to Metroid and Castlevania. So, that's what a roguelike is. A game that's, well, like the game Rogue. But what is a roguelite with a T? As our most favorite 100% accurate site for information from before, Wikipedia says, quote, many of these games use the concepts of procedurally generated maps and permadeaths while moving away from the tile-based movement and turn-based gameplay, often using another gameplay genre. And that sounds a lot more like what we're going to talk about. So, despite the fact that there is a difference between a roguelike and a roguelite, the two terms are often used interchangeably. One look at the Steam store under each tag will show many of the same games even if they don't belong. I will try my best to say roguelite, but if I accidentally say roguelike, no, I probably mean roguelite. God, ain't that a mouthful. So now we know how the game is classified, but what else goes into making a roguelite? To me, there's a few main central mechanics that are important to making a good roguelite. Obviously there's more, but these are the main ones I identified. These factors are meta progression, progression outside of gameplay, self-strengthening, strengthening a run inside of gameplay, the presence of RNG, how luck factors into all of these, and replayability, how well does the game encourage you to play it again. I feel like these 4 mechanics are really important to making a good roguelite, and all the games on our list hit these in some way or the other, but all of them hit them in different ways, so in future parts we're going to go deeper into each mechanic and talk about each game's approach. Again, there's probably other factors I missed, and if you have one that you can think of, please let me know, because if I genuinely do think it's an important enough factor, I will make an extra video on it, because I'm trying to hit everything here. And speaking of our list from earlier, the games are pretty different from each other, but I think there's 2 main approaches we can take with them: action roguelites and deck builders. There's obviously a lot of different styles of gameplay that a roguelite can choose to take, and it feels like there's a roguelike that covers every possible genre, but these are the main ones I'm familiar with and the ones that feel most prevalent within the genre. We are going to define an action roguelite as a game that has real-time gameplay and requires some level of execution. Hades, for example, is an action roguelite. You play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, and you have to fight your way out of the underworld. Your ability to defeat the enemies in your way is usually dictated by your ability to play the game. If you aren't that good at the game, you won't be getting anywhere close to the end. These games tend to have a heavier focus on meta progression and a slightly lighter focus on RNG. RNG is still an important factor, always will be. Again, in Hades, you can't guarantee what boons will spawn or what room is going to come next, but it's possible to beat the game even without a large quantity of buffs as long as you have the skills to stay alive. On the other hand, we have deck builders, which we will define as a game that has some form of, quote, turn-based combat, unquote, with a focus on, well, deck building. This usually involves something separate from your deck that helps strengthen the deck you've chosen. Slays of Spire is a game where you pick a character and fight your way up a spire. Your combat is dictated by what cards are in your deck. Your main goal, other than going up the tower, is to gather artifacts that work with whatever build you're going for, and to get cards that also work with that build, or remove cards that don't. The two really go hand in hand. Deck builders tend to have a heavier focus on builds. So, still looking at Slay the Spire, each character has different things they like to focus on. I mostly play as a Silent, who likes to build around things like daggers or poison. Usually, my goal is to gather cards and artifacts that work with one of those two ideas. Obviously, there's more that could be built around, especially when you go to the other characters, and there's more nuance than just get the things, but that's the basic idea of it. Looking at our main list of games, let's classify each one of them into the two different categories. I'm going to be putting Dead Cells, Hades, and Risk of Rain 2 into the action roguelite category, and Slay the Spire, Peglin, and Balatro into the deck builder category. And then I'll just put our honorable mentions here. Bit of an imbalance, but it won't be too much of an issue since we'll talk about them less. And that does it for part 1 of what makes a good roguelite. It's hard to do a deep dive into a genre without the proper setup, so while this video is shorter, expect the next few parts to be longer as we go in-depth onto each game in specific for whatever mechanic it is we're talking about. With that, I hope you all have a good one. Do the interactions if you feel the inclination. Like, subscribe, tell me your thoughts, and for this series in particular, I actually want to ask you all some questions. I really appreciate any feedback I can get, but also sometimes you guys all have things I missed, so for this one I want to ask you, what do you think the important mechanics to a roguelite are? I look forward to reading what you all have to say. See you next time!